November 12, 1944, Camp Aliceville, Alabama. The glass jar trembled in Helga Brandt's hands, not from fear, from confusion so profound it felt like vertigo. She had survived Rommel's Afrika Korps as a field nurse. She had pulled shrapnel from screaming boys while Stukas screamed overhead. She had eaten rations so moldy they turned her stomach inside out. She had watched good men die in Tunisian sand with nothing but their own blood for company. She thought she had seen everything war could show a human being. Then America handed her a jar of peanut butter. The substance inside looked like axle grease. It smelled strange, nutty, vaguely sweet, completely alien. Across the long wooden table, 33 other German women, all prisoners of war, stared at identical jars with identical bewilderment. An American guard walked past eating it straight from the jar with a spoon. No bread, no shame. Just scooping it like ice cream, smiling like she'd found heaven in a glass container. "Best thing in the world," the guard said cheerfully. "You'll love it." The German women thought it was mockery. But German women thought it was mockery. Some cruel Yankee joke. But then Helga noticed something that made her blood turn cold. The Americans weren't eating different food. They were eating the exact same meals. Same bread, same soup, same mysterious brown paste. Officers, cooks, guards, even the camp commander, everyone ate it. Some even fought over extra portions. And in that frozen moment, staring at that impossible jar, Helga Brandt realized with terrible clarity that everything, absolutely everything, the Reich had told her about America was a lie. Before we continue with what happened when Helga took that first impossible bite, if you're finding this story as shocking as those German women found American abundance, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss these untold chapters of history. And drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from. We love hearing from our global community of history seekers. Now, let's return to that Alabama mess hall in 1944, where 34 enemy prisoners were about to have their entire worldview shattered by a nation that made butter out of peanuts. The train that carried them to Alabama had crossed an ocean of disbelief. These were not frontline soldiers. They were Wehrmachtschulfen, women who had served the Reich in capacities that kept armies moving, nurses who had saved lives in field hospitals from North Africa to Italy, radio operators who had transmitted orders across battle lines, administrative secretaries who had typed reports for generals. None had fired weapons in combat, but all had been captured when Allied forces overran Axis positions in the Mediterranean theater. For months they had moved through processing camps, first Algeria, then Morocco, then on to ships that crossed the Atlantic while U-boats prowled below. They expected the worst. German newspapers had painted America as a nation in collapse. The Great Depression had supposedly broken its spine. Its people were starving. Its economy was shattered. Any German prisoner sent there would face starvation, brutality, revenge. But Camp Aliceville, when they finally arrived that gray November morning, looked nothing like suffering. Built in 1942 to hold captured Axis soldiers, it sprawled across Alabama countryside like a small town. Wooden barracks with actual beds, showers with hot water that worked, a medical clinic with real supplies, a recreation area with books and tables. The women's section was separated by fences, but built to identical standards as the men's compound. Clean, organized, solid, Helga walked through the gates expecting a nightmare. Instead, she found something far more disturbing: normalcy. The first meal arrived within hours. The mess hall was large, well lit, warm against the November chill. Long tables stretched across the room. The smell hit them before they even sat down. Fresh bread, real meat, something cooking that actually smelled like food, not chemicals and desperation. And underneath it all, that strange, nutty aroma none of them could identify. They sat on wooden benches worn smooth by use. American kitchen staff, some of them women in clean aprons, brought out plates. Vegetable soup with actual vegetables floating in clear broth. White bread so soft it compressed under your fingers. Canned peaches swimming in sweet syrup. Meat that looked and smelled like actual meat, not the mystery protein they'd choked down in field rations. And on every table, placed like centerpieces, sat those glass jars filled with brown paste. Helga stared at hers. The label said 2 words in English: peanut butter. The substance inside clung to the glass like grease clings to engine parts. The color reminded her of mud, or perhaps the lubricant mechanics used on tank treads. It did not look like anything a human should eat. Was it das? Whispered Ingrid beside her, a 22-year-old signals operator from Hamburg whose hands still bore calluses from Morse code keys. Nobody knew. They watched the Americans like anthropologists studying an alien species. A young kitchen worker walked past with a sandwich. She had spread the brown paste thick on white bread. She bit into it with obvious pleasure, chewing with her eyes half closed, like she was experiencing something wonderful. Guard Betty noticed their confusion. She was maybe 35, with kind eyes and a slight southern accent that made English sound like music. She walked over with a jar, unscrewed the lid, took a spoon, scooped out a massive portion, and ate it directly. No bread, just peanut butter on metal. She made a sound of satisfaction that transcended language. The German women watched in complete silence. This? Helga finally asked in broken English, pointing at the jar. Every day? Betty laughed, not unkindly. Honey, I've eaten peanut butter every single day since I was 5 years old. My kids eat it. My husband takes it to work in his lunch. Every family in America has jars in their kitchen. It's as normal as breathing. Helga did the mathematics in her head. Every family. There were over 130 million Americans. If every family had peanut butter, that meant millions of jars, tens of millions, being produced, distributed, consumed daily, while German children scraped mold off bread and called it breakfast. The propaganda newspapers back home had showed breadlines in New York. Unemployment, poverty, collapse. But nations in collapse do not turn surplus crops into luxury spreads and hand them to enemy prisoners like it costs nothing. That first meal, the German women ate everything except the peanut butter. The bread vanished. The soup disappeared to the last drop. The peaches were consumed with something approaching reverence. But those jars sat untouched, too strange, too suspicious, perhaps poisoned or spoiled. "Ye sieht aus wie Motor," one woman muttered. "It looks like motor oil." Nervous laughter rippled through the tables. But Helga kept watching the Americans. They didn't just eat it, they craved it. A cook scraped her jar clean. A guard traded her dessert to another guard for an extra serving. 2 kitchen workers argued playfully over the last jar in a supply crate. This wasn't performance. This wasn't mockery. These people genuinely loved this bizarre brown paste. That night, lying in her bunk on a mattress softer than anything she'd slept on in 2 years, Helga couldn't sleep. Not from fear. Not from discomfort. The barracks were heated. The blanket was wool and clean. She couldn't sleep because her mind kept circling back to those jars. Why would a starving nation make butter from peanuts? Why would collapsing people waste resources on novelty foods? Why would guards and prisoners eat identical meals if one group held all the power? Nothing made sense unless everything they'd been told was backwards. The next morning came with pale sunlight and the smell of coffee, real coffee, drifting through the camp. Breakfast brought the same jars, the same confusion, but also something new, curiosity. Ingrid was the first to break. She couldn't stand not knowing anymore. She twisted open a jar. The pop of the seal breaking seemed loud in the quiet mess hall. The smell rose immediately, rich, nutty, faintly sweet, nothing like the chemical stench of ersatz rations back home. She spread a thin layer on bread with a knife. Very thin, barely visible. She lifted it to her mouth while every woman at the table watched. She took the smallest possible bite, chewed slowly. Her face showed nothing at first. Then her eyebrows rose. She chewed more, swallowed, looked at the bread in her hand like it had betrayed her. "Well," Helga asked, "is it terrible?" Ingrid shook her head slowly. 9. She took another bite, bigger this time. "It is very good," she struggled for words. "Salzig und zu zugleich. It fills you. It tastes like strength." Something shifted in the room. Hands reached for jars. Lids twisted open one by one. The nutty smell spread across tables like fog spreading across a field. One woman tried it and nodded. Another tried it and smiled for the first time since capture. A third woman, a nurse named Britta, who hadn't spoken in weeks, tasted it and whispered "Mein Gott," with something approaching wonder. Within 10 minutes, Helga's table had emptied 2 jars completely. She finally tried it herself. The texture was strange, thick and sticky, clinging to the roof of her mouth like paste. But the flavor was extraordinary, rich and deep, salty enough to satisfy something primal, sweet enough to comfort. Her body responded before her mind caught up. After months of inadequate rations, her starving cells recognized real nutrition. Protein, fat, calories, energy. Her body knew what her brain didn't. This food could keep you alive. She took another bite, then another. By the end of breakfast, every jar on every table was empty. 47 jars consumed in a single morning. American kitchen staff stood watching with wide eyes. "Yesterday they wouldn't touch it," one cook said. "Today they ate everything we had." Dorothy, the young kitchen worker who'd first demonstrated PB&J, laughed and shook her head. "Peanut butter does that. Converts everyone eventually." A supply sergeant checked his inventory later that morning. The women's section had consumed nearly 3 times the expected amount. He wrote a confused note in his report that would later be preserved in the National Archives. German female prisoners have developed extreme preference for peanut butter, requesting increased supply. The camp administrator in Washington who read that report must have thought someone was joking, but the numbers didn't lie. Peanut butter consumption in the women's section jumped 340% in the first week. That afternoon, the mess hall made an announcement through a translator. Due to high demand, peanut butter would be rationed. 1 jar per table per meal. no exceptions. The German women protested immediately. "Ein Glas ist nicht genug," Ingrid said through the translator. "One jar is not enough. We need more." The American officer looked genuinely confused. "Yesterday you refused to eat it. Now you're demanding more?" "Yesterday we did not understand," Ingrid replied in careful English. "Today we understand. We want more." Helga sat quietly, thinking about what had just happened. 34 women who'd been trained to distrust everything American had just begged for more peanut butter. Not because they were forced, because they wanted it, because it was good, because their bodies craved what their minds had been taught to reject. That night she wrote in a small notebook she kept hidden. The brown paste is called peanut butter. Americans eat it every day. They make it from peanuts, which are so common here they turn them into butter. We were told America had no food. This was a lie. She paused, pencil hovering. What else was a lie? She didn't write more, but the question burned, and she knew she wasn't the only one asking. Within 2 weeks, peanut butter transformed the entire internal economy of Camp Aliceville. It started small. Gerda offered her dessert to Ingrid for half a spoonful. The trade happened quietly under the table. But secrets don't stay secret in prison camps. By week 3, a complete economy had formed. Peanut butter became currency, more valuable than cigarettes, more valuable than soap, more precious than the small chocolates that occasionally appeared in Red Cross packages. The women called it bronze gold, brown gold. Each table received 1 jar per meal. 3 meals meant 3 jars daily for 8 to 10 women. Roughly 3 tablespoons per person. Not enough, never enough, so trading began. Cigarettes, which had ruled the camp economy, fell in value by 62% within a month. Camp records document this shift. A pack of 20 cigarettes, previously worth significant trade power, could now only buy 2 tablespoons of peanut butter. Women who worked in the kitchen became the wealthiest prisoners. They saw jars first. Sometimes a lid was loose. Sometimes a jar was slightly damaged. These imperfect jars disappeared before reaching the mess hall. Stories of elaborate trades spread through the barracks like wildfire. One woman traded her wedding ring for 6 jars. Another traded a gold bracelet she'd hidden from guards. A third offered to wash another prisoner's clothes for a month in exchange for daily portions. "Wir sind verrückt Juden," Britta said one evening. "We have become crazy, trading gold for ground nuts." Our families would not believe it, but the hunger was real. Not just physical, emotional. The peanut butter represented something beyond nutrition. Comfort in a foreign land, pleasure in captivity, a small daily joy in a joyless situation. Maria Schmidt, 41 years old, the oldest woman in camp, kept a detailed diary throughout her imprisonment. Her granddaughter later donated it to a historical archive in Munich. One entry from December 1944 reads, "I traded my mother's earrings today, silver with small pearls. She gave them to me when I was 18. I traded them for 4 jars of the American peanut butter. I do not regret it. When I eat it, I feel human again. My mother would understand. She always said food feeds the soul, not just the body." Guard Betty became known for accepting peanut butter as payment for small favors. Extra recreation time. A warmer blanket. A newer pillow. "I shouldn't do it," she admitted to another guard. "But have you seen how happy it makes them? They light up like kids at Christmas. Colonel Morrison documented the phenomenon in his monthly report to Washington. German female prisoners have developed unusual attachment to peanut butter rations. This attachment has created stable internal economy that reduces conflicts and improves cooperation. Recommend maintaining current supply levels as morale management tool. Washington approved increased shipments. By January 1945, the women's section received 40% more peanut butter than standard POW allocations. Happy prisoners caused fewer problems. But something deeper was happening beneath the trading and hoarding. The obsession with peanut butter forced the women to interact with their captors. They asked questions. Where does it come from? How is it made? Why do you love it? Guard Ruth explained one afternoon while working in the mess hall. Peanuts grow all over the South. Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi. Farmers grow millions of acres. We have so many peanuts we don't know what to do with them all, so we make peanut butter. We make peanut oil. We make peanut candy. We even feed peanuts to animals. Millions of acres, so many they fed them to pigs. Ingrid translated for the others. The barracks went quiet. In Germany, food was rationed down to the gram. Bread contained sawdust to stretch flour supplies. Meat was rare. Butter was a distant memory. Families counted every calorie. But America grew so many peanuts they gave them to livestock. Helga remembered the Nazi newspapers, the radio speeches. America was weak. America was starving. America would collapse under its own failure. This was why Germany would win. Why sacrifice was necessary. Lies, the word formed in her mind like ice crystal forming on glass. All of it, lies. The realization spread through the barracks like cold water seeping into a basement. It didn't come with anger. It came with exhaustion. The exhaustion of women who had believed, truly believed, that their suffering served a purpose. Now they ate brown paste made from surplus nuts, and every spoonful whispered the same terrible truth. You were fools. Maria wrote in her diary that night, we believed men who told us the world was a certain way. Now we eat American peanuts and see the world as it truly is. This is the worst awakening, the kind that comes with shame. The trading continued. The hoarding continued. But doubt, once planted, grows roots deeper than any fence. The questions started quietly, whispered between bunks after lights out. If they lied about peanut butter, what else was a lie? It was February 1945. The war was collapsing for Germany, but at Camp Aliceville, the real battle was internal. German women prisoners slowly realized that everything they had been taught about America was false. They were fed daily, given peanut butter, white bread, coffee, and meat, while their families at home starved. In the camp library, Life magazine showed American factories producing unimaginable numbers of planes and tanks, and farms overflowing with food. Guards spoke openly of abundance, not cruelty. This contrast shattered Nazi propaganda more effectively than any interrogation. The psychological impact was severe. Medical records described worldview collapse, confusion, shame, and depression caused by truth colliding with belief. Some prisoners resisted, but most began asking questions, learning English, and forming friendships with American guards who treated them as ordinary women, not enemies. When Germany surrendered in May 1945, peace arrived quietly. Extra peanut butter was served, not as celebration, but as normalcy. The women remained in captivity until 1947. then returned to a destroyed, hungry Germany, carrying jars of peanut butter and something heavier, knowledge. Years later, as American planes fed Berlin during the airlift, former prisoners recognized the jars immediately.